Life changes in an instant. One moment you're fine, the next, someone else's negligence has turned everything upside down. And when that happens, you need fighters in your corner. NACE Law Group has been standing up for DC families for decades, taking on medical malpractice, wrongful death, and serious injury cases that others won't touch. While other firms rush to settle, NACE fights for maximum compensation. They know your family deserves justice, and they won't stop until you get it. If you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's mistake, don't wait. Call NACE Law Group today. Visit nacelawgroup.com. That's NACE lawgroup.com.
Today on CityCast DC, we're talking about local DC's response to the Trump law enforcement surge. We're talking about the coming debate over crime stats, and we're going to hear some of your love letters to DC. Plus, in a members-only fourth segment, what about that new metro design? I'm here with my CityCast colleague, Julia Caron, and with Perry Stein from The Washington Post. Today is Friday, August 22nd. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Perry.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Hey, Julia.
Hey, Mike.
So before we dive in, I've got to do a quick shout out to this Friday's sponsor. That's NACE Law Group. You might remember them as Paulson and Nace. Well, now they're NACE Law Group. It's the same great team, just with a new name. So, we talked last week a lot about the mayor's response and the response from officialdom. The response from sort of regular DC folks, I think, has also been pretty interesting because it seems to be taking place across a couple of dimensions that have been in the news this week. And I'm wondering what you guys have seen. Number one, we've all seen these stats about the number of restaurant reservations being way, way down. The Restaurant Association trying to beat the drum saying, please come out for Restaurant Week. Our restaurants need you. Number two, I wrote in my column about the lack of, there's been a couple of energetic protests and all, the people involved are quite committed, but there's been no thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on the mall kind of protest. It's been very low key, and where stuff has been happening is on social media or people gathering around these feds as they do stuff in Washington. What are you guys seeing? Do you have the same sense of that?
So in Cleveland Park, I haven't really seen anything, but from everything that I have seen on social media, there's a couple things that are going on. What I've seen mostly is community members rallying together to push ICE members out. There were protests in Columbia Heights where they surrounded a bunch of ICE agents and police agents and basically told them to go home. There's also protests at Union Station when J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and Stephen Miller showed up on Wednesday. I believe Stephen Miller called the protesters old white hippies, which sure, okay, dude.
I'm in Mount Pleasant, Columbia Heights, where there is a heavy Latino community in DC. And, the streets are pretty empty. I went to a restaurant, a very good restaurant last night or 2 nights ago in Columbia Heights. It's also the week before school starts, so it's always pretty empty. But I was literally, sometimes I have to make a reservation there, and I was literally the only one. So it's a really, politics aside, I cover DOJ. I look at it from a different, my coverage point is not local right now, but just as a resident, it's pretty, I've never quite seen anything like this. And I know, I don't know, what every individual neighbor is going through and what their history in this country is, but everyone seems pretty scared. From what I can tell, and it's just as a human, it's you feel for people.
Also, there's a hurricane coming, so stay indoors maybe.
This week, I think, is historically the slowest week in restaurant. So using that as a barometer is kind of a weird one. But
I think the restaurants are comparing this week to this week last year and this week the year before, rather than to some, hot week during a hot time. But the vibe is, I think people who are activists in their orientation might look at this and say, this is a city that is traumatized and scared, and people are anxious about actually taking part in mass activities, going places, either because they may personally feel vulnerable or because just the notion of being out in this kind of climate where people are being yanked off scooters and so on is unpleasant. It's you just, you're going to spend your hard-earned money at night on the town of pleasure. It's not nice. You know, I guess there's other people who might look at it and say, like, yes, of course, like strident people, true believers are going to be gathering around ICE agents and others and protesting and posting stuff to social media, but like the great majority of people are not. I'm not sure what the read is on that. I've kind of got a theory that our sort of basic vocabulary of protest has changed. Washington is sort of built for these telegenic, like get 100,000 people in the mall kind of protests, and they feel huge and amazing. But we've sort of evolved a different vocabulary where, like, if you look at the Gaza stuff and there's been sort of a lot of the action has been like a much harder core, doing things that show great commitment, you know, in encampments, going to someone's home, and the larger population confining themselves to like zingers on social media. One of the things I wrote about this week is Dildo Gate.
Right outside my door. Yeah.
Right. As a Mount Pleasant resident, so what happened for the uninitiated, and consider yourself lucky if you were the uninitiated, is a group of ICE agents were on Mount Pleasant Street. There's a sort of neighborhood plaza. There were some signs hanging there, anti-ICE signs using bad words, etc. These agents sort of strut down the street. They pose for a picture in front of one of these signs. They then tear it down. And the reason we know this is well, there's two reasons we know this. One, there was a Ring camera or some sort of security camera nearby. But two, they were traveling with a videographer. And so here's where it gets a little trickier. Left behind after that in the plaza was a very anatomically correct dildo. The video does not make it clear where it came from, at least as best I could tell. But I've talked to a bunch of witnesses, neighbors who never saw it before and said they've never seen such a thing in that plaza anyway, since, it's a pretty family kind of area. They said that throwing dildos at like WNBA players has become a sort of summertime bro right-wing meme. The White House says that's ridiculous. They said that's ridiculous. You can't. There's video of the event and you don't see them placing it. On the ICE video that they put on social media, the sex toy is like pixelated. But this is, this is very much of the moment where you've got like neighbors, people saying like, they're not just doing law enforcement action that we may or may not agree with, but it's the sort of comporting themselves like a hostile occupying army. Much worse to my mind than leaving a sex toy behind, if that is what happened, is why the hell are they out tearing down signs? They're not there for like zoning enforcement.
That I don't know, but I mean, look, I used to, and I'll speak a little bit to my coverage area, but, I used to cover protests here. So I'd been to every single protest in DC, for like a 4 or 5 year period. I went to the Women's March. I did the George Floyd protests, the J6 protests. And what was remarkable in those protests, right, is that, you don't know what these individual officers personally believe in, but at that time, you did have residents or protesters hurling insults at the officers, whether calling them fascists. What are you doing here? Particularly at the George Floyd protests, at the Jan 6 stuff, it was, we know what happened there. But what was remarkable is these officers never said anything. They all stood there, and it is pretty striking to see what is the contrast of what is happening now, which is that, we saw on the 14th and S when they took down ICE arrested the guy on the moped, liberals are ruining this country. And you see what you mentioned, you called it Dildo Gate, but what happened in Mount Pleasant, it's a striking difference. And I think a couple things. One is MPD, as DC residents, they have really strict rules as what you can and cannot do. That is a police force that is not, every police force has different conduct rules. MPD they have very strict rules over there, is my understanding. And then you have ICE and you have a different culture of allowing that. I don't think anyone's going to get fired from what I can tell from saying these. I just don't, I don't know. I don't cover ICE. I don't know what is happening, but it is a remarkable difference what we're seeing. I think about how many of these comments could, depending on what someone's getting arrested for, depending on what the charges are, a lot of them are just simple illegal, unlawful entry charges. But how do those comments impact what happens in a court proceeding and things like that?
I also think that this is a matter, too, of like ICE agents coming up masked and with no nameplates besides like ICE on the back. Whereas DC MPD, right, they have to have like name, badge number. Their face has to be out, right?
And and the rules are strict for MPD's behavior, not because like MPD are nice guys or, have this like some bleeding heart thing, but because those are the rules you need to live by in order to maintain sort of social harmony. And this sort of behavior as if you are a hostile occupying army we've talked about DC having a sort of low energy vibe right now, but one of these days, like someone's going to do something dumb. And if you have not built up goodwill by sort of acting like a good neighbor, the backlash against the mistaken police shooting or whatever is going to be all the worse. And I think that's people I talk to in the city government, that is their great nightmare. Hey, remember that amazing little cafe you discovered last summer with the perfect latte and the crazy view? Or that sweet hiking spot your friend told you about but you can't remember the name? With Overlook Maps, special places never get lost again. You can create personal lists of places you've been and want to go. Build your must-visit list for your next vacation, your foodie favorites for date nights, or your weekend getaways when you need to escape. Share your favorite hidden gems with friends and family. Let them discover that incredible barbecue joint you found, or that scenic outlook that takes your breath away. Or keep your secret spots completely private. Planning a trip with friends? Create a shared list where everyone can add their ideas. Visiting a new city? Check out lists from locals who know the real gems, not just the tourist traps. And here's the best part. There will be no ads cluttering your lists. No one's selling your data to advertisers. Just your personal collection of amazing places organized exactly how you want them. Overlook Maps. Collect, organize, and share the places that matter to you. Download free at overlookmaps.com and check out overlookmaps.com/DC to see some of our lists and great spots on a map in your pocket. Your places, your way. So, Perry, you were talking about your coverage area. You covered DOJ for the Post, but you're a former local reporter here. I suspect that this story about whether the MPD is cooking its books about the rate of violent crime is going to be a big story over the next few weeks. It's already like a big refrain in right-wing media. The Justice Department has launched an investigation. Can you sort of explain what's happening there?
Yeah. So, a few months ago, and I will give a shout out to NBC's Mark Seagraves, who's been really on top of this storyline. There was someone who was placed on leave, a police officer or a commander, and the investigation was, did she or did he, manipulate or do something with the numbers? Bowser has said on TV that, it only affects a few cases, but obviously this has been latched onto, and I reported yesterday that the Justice Department has launched an investigation into this, meaning a federal investigation that, per my sources, it goes beyond just one commander, this investigation. Now, the context that I think everyone should know is that this is a problem. Like nationally, people always say, crime stats are lower. You even had J.D. Vance come out. I believe it was J.D. Vance the other day saying stats are cooked across the country. And what they mean by that, I want to be clear, is from what I can tell, I don't believe the allegations are someone is erasing numbers or ignoring just ignoring a robbery from, and not putting it. My understanding of how this is commonly done, and I want to be clear, I don't know the specifics to the allegations in DC, is that there's a lot of subjectivity into how crime stats are done, meaning you can choose, you have to categorize certain things. Well, what happens if you can't prove that the person had a gun on them? You think they did, but you can't prove it to, go to court, right? These aren't prosecution charges. These are crime stat charges. So do you choose this as a crime in the burglary or robbery category? Is it a property crime? Is it a violent crime? Is it a non-violent crime? So there can be some subjectivity in how you use this data. When you have a police officer respond to a crime, what are they doing at that matter? I mean, we've heard, I'm sure, from our friends who have had incidents happen to them, like, oh, the police asked me these questions, they couldn't prove certain things, whatever. So that's kind of what it means. Now, it's a prosecutor's job to decide how those accusations are charged, and those are separate stats, if that makes sense.
And also the motivation for some of this I think what you're saying is that the accusation may be that police have downgraded things. So instead of calling it assault with a deadly weapon, they're calling it something else. So
Maybe.
Say I throw a sandwich at you,
Right.
that could be assault with a deadly weapon, if the sandwich is really bad or something.
Hey, they tried to argue that in court, didn't they?
Or it could be something else. And the person doing that categorizing has imperfect information maybe, but also, sometimes it's harder to bring certain charges, or there's more of a hassle. And if you're a police or a prosecutor, these things, I mean, no one's proud of this, but these things factor in your thinking. And so your motivation is not necessarily just like what's going to make the stats look best.
Exactly. And I'm sure every commander, I don't know, I don't cover MPD, but has pressure. Everyone wants crime down, and you're a better commander. There's no doubt that there's probably some incentive. But again, we're talking about it's one thing to put someone on leave and do an internal investigation. It's another thing to say, hey, these are federal charges that we're going to bring against you, and we are going to prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed a federal crime. Now, that's a high bar, but don't forget, they first have to get, there is, as I tell everyone and hopefully make clear in copy too, every single case that they bring, that any administration brings. I mean, we saw it in the Biden administration. We've seen it in every administration since the beginning of time. When you open an investigation, there are many legal hurdles that you have to go before you even get an indictment. And, we are far way off from anything like that in this case. The big difference is in this administration. I mean, one of the big differences is that you don't talk about investigations. The president isn't tweeting that someone's under serious investigation. That breaks all norms in legal practice, right? Because the idea is you're innocent till proven guilty. The norm in DOJ has always been, we don't want to muddy someone's reputation until there is an indictment.
So it's a pair. The other stats news right now, a couple of your colleagues, Olivia George and Emma Uber, reported about it's really opaque what the stats are for this current surge when we're talking about other agencies besides the MPD. The Trump administration puts out statements saying such and such number of arrests have happened, but your colleagues had a very hard time nailing that down. Can you sort of explain, I think this has to do with the difference between federal and local agencies, but can you sort of explain that situation so people understand it?
Yeah, I mean, so right now, the way I'm kind of have been explaining it even to friends is that, obviously everything has been explained through the lens of a federal takeover, right? But and we know that's a little more complicated, but there's three levers that are going on here. You have the National Guard, you have MPD, and then you also have, separate from both those things, a surge in all these federal officers. You have FBI agents, you have ATF agents, you have more Homeland Security agents and Park Police doing different things than you would normally have here in DC. And so what it appears they're doing is calculating all these arrests from all these different agencies, and they're saying they're framing it as this would be the addition. This would be a top of what you usually have. But it's unclear a little bit as to, is it more just violent crime that they're arresting? How are these immigrant arrests playing into it, which are more than usual? I don't know if that's getting, Mike, at what you were trying to ask.
No, it is, because I think look, I think there's a lot of people in D.C. who are, D.C. diehards, and who, no matter what the effect of this surge is, are so offended by the trampling on the concept of self-government that they are against it. But I think there's probably a much larger number of people who are also going to say, let's see what the results are. And what I think all this says is it's going to be hard to know. And there will be sort of just like so much else in America where you'll have your truth and I'll have mine. And, did this surge lead to like less crime? Did it lead to more bad guys being taken off the street? Did it lead to more bad stuff happening because cops were doing things that cops had to stop doing things they wanted to do? Like, I don't know. And I guess what I'm reading from all this is we may never know. All right, so can we just like do a quick change of pace here?
One good thing. We need one good thing, guys.
One good thing, right? So Barry, you are my former Washington City paper colleague. You're a DC true believer too. So today we wanted to share some love letters to DC from listeners and readers of our newsletter. Last week, Kayla from Hey DC wrote a letter about why she loves DC. The responses were so overwhelming that we wanted to collect some of them.
This is like melting my heart, guys. Is there one thing I think you love in particular about DC? Does this spark anything for you?
Well, I love my neighborhood. I love Mount Pleasant. I feel like, you know, what I tell my friends who live in New York, who I'm always trying to get to come to DC, is that DC is like a really easy place to build community because everyone is passionate about something here, whether you're involved in government or journalists, even outside of that. I just find everyone is so invested in the city in a really wonderful way that makes you want to be a part of it. And on a more practical level, I mean, you can get anywhere in this city pretty quickly on public transit or a bike. You know, it's like, you know, it's easier you can get anywhere. And I have like no friend that's too far that lives in the city that I can't see very often because it's too far. And I think it's just a wonderful place that you can be outside a lot. There's lots of good outdoor space, and it's a good place to build a community and keep good friendships from all different walks of life.
You know, one of my friends said this is the only place he's ever lived where people throw welcome parties when someone moves here. And I think that when we're obviously talking about the more transient part of town, but this person also said, and it's really stuck with me, that, you know, I've lived in a lot of places and I've never lived someplace where so many people like their job, or if they don't like their immediate job, they like their, you know, calling. And the reasoning for that was, you know, look at like people who, you want to live in New York or Paris or something. You're moving there because it's New York or Paris or something. And then you got to pay rent. So you get a job and maybe you like it and maybe you don't, but that's not really the point. But a lot of the people who move here as adults, you know, I didn't have a choice. I was born here, but a lot of people who move here as adults move here they don't move here for the weather or the reputation, thanks to national politics. They move here for a job. And so that's going to make them more incentivized to like it. The downside of that is we get hammered for asking people what they do all the time.
Yeah. It's like our calling card is like asking, what do you do, is our way of saying, like, how did you get here? What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? Which, God, I mean, the number of times I've been asked that is a lot. But that said, like, if that's our thing and that's the like biggest strike against us, that's not too bad.
All right, here are some of the other love letters that folks sent us.
Hi, CityCast DC. This is Caitlin from Bethesda, and here is what I love about DC.
There are many things I love about DC.
Okay, there are two things I would like to highlight that I love about DC.
I love the vibrant dance community here in DC.
The cultural life can't be beat.
There's so many things to love about DC.
I love that DC is like a big, small town. I feel like I see someone I know almost every time I leave my house. It's super walkable and beautiful, and I don't know, it's full of life and color and beautiful people.
One is that it's really incredible that we have a major park running right through the city. It's incredible that I can walk out of my house and find myself on a hiking trail within like 15 minutes. And I think that is just an unbelievably cool thing. And the other is how international the city is. I love that I hear all kind of different languages. I love that it feels like we're truly connected to the world here.
I love that they're in this big, big city that we all call home. There's so many little tight-knit communities that just deepen the roots for me and everyone else here. For me, there's a little board game store in Southeast called Labyrinth Games that has the nicest staff, and just love to recommend games based on what you're interested in, have game nights, and it just like, it makes it feel a lot more homey for me to have that so close.
I'd love to share my love letter to the DC dance community. Whether it's taking a beginner-friendly class in a studio or a free social dance night at a bar or catching a show by some local choreographers, I have met some of the most wonderful people outside of my usual circles. It is such a great way to experience art and get active.
What I love about DC, there are so many smart people at all strata of society. People are committed to what they believe in, but leave a little bit of room for humor and irony and wit. Like that time when the pre-Bezos Washington Post had a contest to create a city tagline. I think the winner was something like, DC, a work-free drug place. That was great. I love the Potomac for paddling, for walking along the C&O Canal, for biking, the bridges over Rock Creek Park, all the university campuses, the mall and all the events there.
I love that I've always felt like we're in it together here. I hope everyone uses this time to shout it to the entire nation. The nation is watching us right now, and we should be using every platform to scream statehood, because this is a moment where we might get people to understand.
I could keep going and going, but those are the two that really stand out.
Thanks for everything you all do, too. I love the podcast and the newsletter.
And thank you so much to all the listeners and readers that called in. We love hearing your voice. Today, paid subscribers get a bonus 4th roundup chat. We're going to talk about the new Metro design, which until the end of today, Friday, you will have a chance to vote on yourself. If you want to be sure you always get the full episode, become a member. Head to membership.citycast.fm and sign up. It's only $10 a month. And members get ad-free listening, exclusive members events, and an extra events newsletter every week. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Annie Reese, Julia Karen, Ash Durbin, and Lizzie Goldsmith. Newsletter editor Kayla Cody-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter Hey DC this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer, from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan, with additional music from Rue Walker and Tambor from Triple Scoop Music via Getty Images. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell everyone about it? It's a low energy time in DC, maybe, but it's high energy time at CityCast. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.